In long lines that spanned generations, they waited for hours to say goodbye to Mikhail Gorbachev. There was no state funeral for the country's last Soviet leader. Instead, Russians were allowed inside the imposing hall of columns to view the open casket. Among them, this history teacher, born nearly a decade after the collapse of the Soviet Union. He brought important values, he says, and I think for all of us, freedom of speech and democracy. But at 91, Gorbachev lived long enough to see Russia's leadership roll back much of that change. We don't know what was written on the paper, but it's a sign of the times that she was quickly detained and led off by security officers. And there's one man not in Moscow today, President Vladimir Putin. The official line from the Kremlin, he's too busy. He paid his respects on Thursday. It's no secret the pair had a strained relationship. Putin views the collapse of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. And many Russians can't forgive Gorbachev for reforms that caused economic chaos and for letting the Soviet Union fall apart. In the West, he was hailed a hero. And it's notable there's no Western heads of state here. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban attended. He's one of the few European leaders still to have good relations with Putin. The reason the others are staying away won't allow Gorbachev to rest easy. In the final months of his life, he was said to have been shocked and bewildered by Russia's actions in Ukraine. Putin has been visiting Kaliningrad, a Russian enclave on the Baltic Sea. Here he spooks his bodyguards with a rare move, briefly stepping out of his armoured car to ask locals if everything's okay. Everything's not okay between Russia and the West. Russian gas was due to flow through here to Europe from today. Instead, Russia's state energy firm Gazprom has raised eyebrows with news it's found a leak on Nord Stream 1 and it could be closed indefinitely. Moscow denies the charge it's using its gas supplies to blackmail Europe.
Putin taking another step towards the cutting of gas supplies? It would be a contract violation. Everyone hopes that will not happen. If it happens, it's clear that there will be consequences, but it's also clear that we have been preparing for months for this risk. So we must not underestimate it, but certainly we are not going to be intimidated.
Even at the height of the Cold War, Russia kept supplies into Europe flowing. As Gorbachev is laid to rest, many in the West will remember him as the man who created the conditions for the end of the Cold War in 1991. As they mourn a man who helped unite, they face another who divides.
So, what will Russia's shutdown of the Nord Stream pipeline mean for Europe's economies and, of course, for households here? Well, our economics reporter Neil MacDonald joins me now. Looks like very big trouble for Europe.
Well, Europe has been preparing for months for the possibility that there may be further interruptions to its gas supply from Russia. And now we're going to find out whether those preparations are good enough. Now, over the summer, these countries have been filling up their storage facilities. And right now, they're about 80% full, which is roughly where the European Union wants them to be.
It's pretty good.
Very, very much so. But what we don't know is Nord Stream ever going to be turned back on by Russia? And that will influence how quickly countries have to dip into these supplies. And of course, the other big imponderable is we don't know about the weather. We don't know how cold it's going to get this winter. Now, the energy analysts at Wood Mackenzie reckon that if Nord Stream stays shut and if it's an extremely cold winter, then by next spring, storage levels could be down to 4%. And that's the sort of point where we were talking about rationing.
4%, wow. You can't predicate energy policy to what the weather's going to do. But you're bound to ask, does a mild winter get us through this?
Well, it'll really help, but it won't necessarily mean an end to the energy price crisis. That's because European countries have been going out and buying gas to replace Russia on world markets, and it's expensive. So just because they've got a load of gas in storage doesn't mean they've got a load of cheap gas.
Right. Here we are in these islands, in Europe geographically, out of Europe perhaps politically. What does it mean for us?
Well, we don't buy directly from Russia, but we do buy on those world markets I just mentioned. And of course, we are facing increased competition there from other European countries. So Russia's move does increase the pressure, and that pressure is severe. The Resolution Foundation has been looking at how much households spend on gas and electricity after inflation. And you can see here, from 1970, it's basically a flat line until you get to this winter, when it absolutely spikes upwards. Six-fold increase, unprecedented in half a century. That chart shows you the challenge that is awaiting the next Prime Minister when they take over in less than 48 hours' time.
Wow, thanks, Neil. That's a graphic of horror.